Yo, what's up? I'm glasseyed or Morgan. It has been a minute since I made a YouTube video. I took a bit of a break from everything, to be honest, over the last couple of months, over Christmas and stuff, but I'm back. We're so back, and I'm gonna do another track breakdown, mix deconstruction of a track I released last year with my band Kissing on Camera. For those of you who don't know, I make music under the name glasseyed, and I'm also a producer, mix engineer, and I've worked with loads of artists around Ireland and the UK. If you like the videos, if you find what I'm saying interesting or at least entertaining, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. It goes a long way. And if you would like to work with me on a musical project, let me know. Send me a DM. I'm always looking for work, people to collaborate with, etc. So yeah, just hit me up for sure. So moving on to the video, this track, as I said, was released by my band Kissing on Camera last year. A lot of the other tracks on this channel have been very kind of metal focused. This one is not at all. We're not that type of band. This music is much more in the kind of emo, alt rock, you could maybe say indie rock sphere. The tracks still hit hard, but it's not heavy in the same way, which obviously calls for very, very different production and mixing styles. So I'm gonna play a portion of the track for you here so you can just hear what it sounds like. So that's the general vibe. You can hear there's almost a shoegaze element to it, but it's not really full-on shoegaze. So for this track, I had a couple of aims for the mix that we as a band wanted to kind of hit in terms of sound and production and vibe. And they were quite different to the aims that I would usually have for mixing my own music. The general gist of what we were going for with this whole EP was to try and preserve that kind of DIY sound, but make sure that it also sounded professional and a little bit polished, just polished enough to kind of hit hard and maintain that sense of tightness, but just dirty enough to feel a little bit old school and DIY, if that makes sense. We also really wanted to preserve a kind of live feeling, like a real band playing in the room together style feeling, which was tough because when we made this EP, we were living in different countries. We still do. I live in Ireland, the rest of the guys live in London. So trying to navigate that recording wise was difficult. We recorded some stuff when the guys were in Ireland. We recorded some of it in my studio. Some of it was done remotely, and then some of it was done with me going over to London. So it was kind of all over the place in terms of recording process. And then the other big thing was we wanted to kind of go for as much of an analog sound as we could in terms of like the guitar amps and guitar recordings. We didn't actually record any real guitar amps. The guitars are all DI'd, which is interesting. We'll go through that in a minute, but we certainly wanted to aim for a kind of old school analog sound. So jumping into the recording here, we're going to start with the drums. The drums were all recorded live, which I think is a very essential element of this track. If you're going for a live sounding feel, basically the most important thing to capture live is the drums, in my opinion. It's very, very, very difficult to achieve a convincing live band sound with programmed drums, which is why programmed drums tend to suit genres that are very heavily produced, like modern metal. It's possible, you can do it, but it's difficult. The easiest first step to getting a more rough around the edges, loose sound is to record the drums live. I went over to London and our friend Brian recorded and engineered these drums. He then sent me the stems and I did a little bit of processing and I added a couple of bits which I can show you now. So the original drum tracks sound like this. And if I just click through the tracks here, you can see on the kick, we've got just some basic compression. We've got Ableton's drum bus. There's quite a bit of EQing going on. Snare, again, a little bit of EQing, along with a little bit of decapitator, which goes on, to be honest, so many tracks in all of my sessions. Then we've got this crotch mic, which was basically another mic that was below the snare, I believe. This dirt track, I think Brian ran it through some like saturation of his own before he sent it to me. I'm not sure exactly what he did, but it sounds kind of like obviously dirty and janky or whatever. It sounds like this. So that's kind of blended into the rest of the track quietly. Then we've got the overheads as well. And then finally, we've got a room mic as well. So all of them come together to form a really nice sounding drum track on its own. And then I went in and used some Get Good Drums sounds to beef up the kick and the snare. So basically what I did was took the kick and the snare tracks, converted the audio to MIDI, went in, cleaned up the MIDI a little bit manually, and then inserted my own kick and snare sounds just to sit underneath the recorded ones to kind of beef them up and give them a bit more presence. So I'm going to play the drums again, and then I'm going to turn those samples on so you can hear the difference they make. That's the basis of the drum track. There's not a whole else going on. Over the whole drum group, we've got one instance of Decapitator, just adding a little bit of saturation. And then the drums are all also running through this reverb send down here, which is Ableton's convolution reverb. The one other thing that I will talk about with the drums here is they are also being parallel compressed. The entire drum group here is being sent to this send track here, which has one instance of Joey Sturgis's gain reduction, which is just a really, really, really heavy compressor. And then one instance of Soundtoys Devil-Lock, again, similar, really aggressive like compressor saturator. So if I solo this send, what you hear is this. So really, really, really overblown, heavily compressed, heavily saturated sound. And that is just being blended in alongside the regular drum tracks to give the whole thing this kind of beefy sound. Moving on from the drums then, we can talk about the bass. One thing to note, this track is really, really bare bones. It's basically just drums, bass, guitars, and vocals. There is not really any effects or soundscapes, synths, anything like that. Super skeletal track and a super skeletal mix, which is kind of fun from my perspective, I think, as a mix engineer, because it means you don't have any option paralysis. You know, you just have the elements that are in front of you and you have to make them sound as good and as clean and as big as possible, which I think is a fun challenge. So moving on to the bass then, if I turn off the processing chain here, it sounds like this. Fairly normal bass sound. And then what's happening is we've got one instance of Neural DSP Dark Glass. This is an absolutely amazing plugin that I put on almost all bass tracks in my mixes. Whether it's like bass guitar or bass synths, you can run through it as well. It always sounds amazing. Often I'll use this B7U one, which has a little bit of a more modern sound. It's a little bit cleaner, but this vintage pedal within the plugin is just a little bit dirtier, which I liked for this particular track. And then on top of that, we've got a little bit of compression happening as well, and just some really basic EQing. Within this EQ here, you'll see it's dynamically dipping as the track plays, and that is basically just the EQ taking out a little bit of that clanky pick noise that you hear, just to kind of tame it ever so slightly. Aside from that, really, really simple bass track, nothing crazy going on. Moving forward really quickly, you can see this effects track here in the mix. The main thing that was in here was when we recorded the drums, also in the studio, there was this Moog synth, and we were like, I don't know, we were kind of getting on our Pink Floyd buzz or something, and for some reason we thought that this could really work. This track really needs some alien space sounds. So we recorded, I can't even remember what it sounds like, to be honest, but ended up not going in the mix, as you can see. So that was what that effects group was originally going to be for. There's also this kind of echo thing going on. It's really buried in the mix. You can barely hear it, but I'll play it for you here. Aside from that, nothing else in that effects group. And then moving on to, I think, kind of the main body of the track, which is the guitars here. We've got a few different guitar tracks. The main rhythm ones, we have double tracks, so one on the left, one on the right. This left one here is Sam, who plays guitar in the band, and then this one is Josh, who plays the other guitar and sings. All of the guitars in this whole EP that we did are DI'd and run through amp sims, which I think has surprised some people that I've chatted to since this EP came out. I think amp sims are not generally associated seemingly with this genre. People kind of really heavily associate them with like metal production, modern metal stuff, which makes total sense. I understand it. But you can make them sound amazing in basically any context if you've got the right amp sim, you've got the right production decisions, and obviously the right guitar playing. So I'll run through it here. Really, really simple production wise. You'll see as I click through all the tracks here, there's barely any processing. A lot of these tracks, there's just the amp sim itself and nothing else happening. We start with this intro guitar here. So you can see we are using Archetype Gojira, which is pretty funny because this band does not sound anything like Gojira. But we're using this middle amp, this kind of crunchy amp, which provides a great balance between the ultra clean sound and then that super mega metal overdriven saturated sound. And if you just dial the gain back a little bit, you can get a really nice edge of breakup tone out of this amp. So I think, if I remember correctly, pretty much all of the guitars are running through this exact same amp. Yeah, they are. For the two main rhythm guitar tracks, it's really simple. There's no pedals going on, there's no reverb, there's no nothing, there's no EQ. I didn't change any of the cabs. I just pulled back the gain a little bit and played with the EQ on the actual amp. You'll see this other guitar, Josh's guitar on the right, is the exact same. Play the two of them together, sound like this. So yeah, not overly distorted, certainly not clean either. A little bit later in the track, we get a couple of other guitar bits here. In the verse, we get this kind of lead line that happens here, which I'll solo for you. And in context, so just a little bit of a counter melody there. This is the exact same amp. Again, no processing aside from the amp sim. There's just a little bit of reverb on this one to kind of place it a little bit more in the background, a little bit further away, kind of give it some space. And the track is pretty low in the mix. We got this little guitar break here, which is effectively the exact same as the other one. I think the gain is just pulled back a little bit. Yeah, so it's much cleaner. And then the last thing I'll go through guitar-wise is we have a couple of lead sections that happen here, which I'll solo for you. So on this first one that you heard, just a little bit of reverb. The section that Sam is playing here just kind of backs up that little momentary melody that you hear in the main guitar riff. This kind of harmonic section that happens over the second verse is amazing. It's super kind of classically emo in the way that he wrote it. I'll play it again for you. So beautiful. There's a little bit more processing going on here. We've got compression happening before anything else, just to grab those peaks and stuff, because it's quite a dynamic guitar line going between the harmonics and the regular fretted stuff. So this compressor just grabs all of that and brings it to the same level. Then we've got the exact same amp going, but we've got the dirt pedal on, we've got chorus on. Chorus is my favorite effect in the world. Sam absolutely hates it. He never lets me use it, but I got away with it in this instance. Thank you, Sam. After that, just a tiny little bit of reverb as well. And that lead line just goes over the top of that second verse, which I'll play in context here. So the last thing I'll go through here then is the vocals. There's quite a bit of processing going on in the vocals, maybe more than anywhere else in the track, to be honest. We have a center track here, we've got some double tracks, and we've got some kind of shouts and stuff happening in the back. So this is the main verses soloed. My trick for staying at the party, loose-lipped, don't know any. This center vocal has kind of the main vocal sound going on. So the first thing it hits is this Joey Sturgis gain reduction, which, as I said earlier, really, really heavy compressor. This runs straight into a EQ, which kind of just shapes the kind of general sound of the vocal. And then we have waves de-esser. I put this on pretty much every vocal. It's really, really easy to use. It's you pretty much just drag it on the track and then bring the slider down and it works. And then we have Ableton's echo just giving a little bit of slapback delay as well. So if I turn this echo off, you'll hear. My trick for staying at the party,
Loose-lipped.
You get that really subtle like slapback effect, which really helps add to that old school analog vibe. That center vocal is backed up by a kind of left and right track, so the vocals are basically triple tracked. These are both very, very minimal production wise, just hitting that same gain reduction compressor and then a little bit of de-essing. However, what happens after that on the group of all the vocals, we have all of them running through Shep's Omnichannel, which is a plugin by Waves. It's one of my favorite plugins for vocals. It's just this really easy to use channel strip. Comes with a really nice saturator here, which you can turn up and down to taste. It colors the vocal in a really nice way. If you want to use it, it's got a de-esser and stuff in here as well. Then I'm using the EQ to just give the high end a tiny bit of a boost, an extra bit of presence, and just control some of the mids here with the tone. And then I'm using the compressor here to just grab all of the peaks from the whole vocal group and bring them all in and under control. Someone asked me in my Instagram DMs a while ago, was there, did we use like any crazy preamps or outboard gear for the vocals? The answer is no, nothing at all. I think Josh sent me, he recorded these vocals on his own and then sent them to me. He might have done a little bit of compression and stuff on his own. I'm not totally sure. But other than that, there's no crazy preamps or hardware gear being used here at all. Backing up those main vocals, we've got these harmonies here, which happen in the kind of chorus section. Minimal production on the two tracks, the two individual tracks, just gain reduction happening here. And then we are using Shep's Omnichannel to process the two of them together. Again, they're saturated. We've got the de-esser on, a little bit of EQing, a little bit of compression. These harmonies also have the lows cut quite a bit, which give them quite a thin sound. And that's just because I didn't find the lows necessary to have in the mix for those tracks. Since they're just sitting on top of the main vocal, we really only needed those higher frequencies out of them. And then the very last thing I'll touch on here is I think one of the most fun things to do in the recording process, which is these kind of extra shouted vocal ad-libs that we have here. And you'd almost not notice them in the track when you're listening to the whole thing together, but they just add this amazing sense of like energy and urgency to the lines. A little bit of compression, some heavy decapitator to really break them up and distort them, and then some low cuts just to get the offending bass frequencies out of the mix. But yeah, adding these kind of weird ad-libs, different inflections and stuff in the backing vocals of the track, even when they're subtle and quite far back in the mix, they can really help add this sense of like life or like urgency in the track. The other thing I'll touch on with the vocals here as well is that they're also being parallel processed by this return track here. So very simple. We've got really heavy compression, a really heavy radio style filter. Then we've got really, really wet sounding chorus and very, very heavy use of decapitator. So they sound really kind of gnarly and overblown. And that is just blended way, way back in the mix just to give those vocals an extra kind of edge, an extra sense of dirt and grit. That's the whole track. That's everything. Very, very simple. As you can see, nothing wild going on, but also a really fun challenge for me as a mix engineer to kind of work with such few elements and try and get them sounding as big as possible. If you enjoyed the video, as I said earlier, please like and subscribe. Goes a long way, really appreciate it. But regardless, I really appreciate you for watching. If you ever want to work with me, let me know, hit me up, send me a message. All right, have a good day or night or whenever you're watching this. Cheers.